Professor Nanda, the recording has begun and you may begin. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Delighted to be here with you. Today is a very special occasion. The International Commission on Human Rights and Religious Freedom is holding these hearings on the human rights situation in Bangladesh, and especially pertaining to minorities. And before I talk about the commission, today's hearings, and how these hearings are going to be conducted, what the purpose is, and how it's a tradition, and a very rich tradition of private bodies, also the International Commission of Jurists, many other human rights bodies that have conducted these public hearings. And the purpose simply is to monitor, to oversee human rights conditions around the world. And it's not simply the purpose of governments and the purpose of intergovernmental organizations, but private bodies, because human rights are inalienable. And before I talk about the hearings today, I am delighted to say that the President, CEO of this commission is with us. Usually when you introduce the President of the United States, you simply say, here is the President. And I think similarly, I would probably say, here is Dr. Adityanjee. But a couple things about him. He's a visionary. He has been able to build institutions on strategic affairs. He is an analyst, and he has again created an organization that is looking about strategic affairs around the world. And he's the one who created, this is the brainchild of Adityanjee, the International Commission on Human Rights and Religious Freedom. And the need for this kind of an organization, you can understand, is at the present time very much around. And so here is Dr. Adityanjee to start the proceedings. And then I will say a couple words about how the hearings are going to be conducted today. So here is Dr. Adityanjee.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Nanda. I have a PowerPoint that I will share with our audience. Let me see. Are you able to see my PowerPoint? Are people able to see my? Okay.
Yes.
So we have special hearings on human rights violation in Bangladesh. Before I go to that, on behalf of the Board of Directors and Executive Team of the ICHRRF, I invite everyone, including the witnesses and audience, for joining an open hearing on human rights violation and persecution of minorities in Bangladesh. International Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom is a US-based nonprofit organization that upholds human rights and religious freedom. We are focused on educational, research, legal and human rights advocacy and charitable purposes, and strive to be an advocate for the human rights and religious freedoms of unrepresented communities across the world. We believe that humankind can no longer afford to be selectively vocal about the rights of specific sets of people. A humane and just world necessitates fair treatment of all living beings. Our initiatives include monitoring violations of freedom and sanctity of religious, spiritual, philosophical minorities across the world, research into documentation of the culture and history and challenges faced by such communities, policy recommendations on human rights, religious diversity, collaboration to support cultural and philosophical diversity across the world. And we have recently started a fellowship training program in human rights called Nanda Fellowship Training Program. This is our logo. Today's special hearing is on human rights violation in Bangladesh. The chairperson of the committee is Honorable Professor Ved P. Nanda, an eminent legal scholar, a distinguished professor of international law and human rights based in University of Denver. I am not going to go into the history of Bangladesh, but since its inception, when it was partitioned from India as part of Pakistan, there have been human rights problems. Even after liberation of Bangladesh in 1971, these problems and atrocities and human rights violations have continued. So this is a country of special concern as far as minorities are concerned. Some housekeeping rules. I would like everyone to keep their cell phones on mute. Please don't try to interrupt our chairperson or the witnesses when they are speaking. All the witnesses must stick to the allocated time. Chairperson has the final authority in allowing any questions when audience sends some questions. Otherwise, most of the time will be done on questions by chairperson or other members of the special hearing committee. And with that, I'm going to finish my presentation and give the floor back to Professor Nanda, who will be conducting these hearings. Professor Nanda, please.
Thank you very much, Adityanjee. I am delighted to welcome everybody and a very warm welcome from a very cold Denver to all of you. And today's hearings, as I mentioned earlier, are in the best tradition of these public hearings. Intergovernmental organizations, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, earlier the European Commission on Human Rights, African Commission on Human Rights, and many of these organizations, just as Human Rights Council, they have been holding these hearings. And the purpose again is in order to have an oversight, in order to have monitoring of human rights conditions around the world. Human rights, as all of you know, is a very potent idea. It is robust. The idea itself has changed the situation around the world. As you think about the apartheid, as you think about totalitarian regimes in Eastern Europe, as you think about all those military dictatorships in Latin America, and if there is one element that toppled all of them, that is human rights. And I was very pleased to see that somebody said that it's a curious grapevine that penetrates deep in closed societies. And that is what human rights do. And human rights treaty bodies today, human rights committees on the rights of the child, Human Rights Committee itself, they have been holding hearings. I have had the privilege of watching and participating in these hearings. The hearing that in Denver we held, that was after the G8, the day G8 met here in this city. And at that time, international human rights bodies decided to hold hearings on the indigenous people from New Zealand, from Australia, Hawaii, from Europe, and I had the privilege to chair those hearings. Then we also had hearings on Bangladesh, and that was the Rutgers University did and participated in that. And then we also had hearings that we held on the Roma in Europe. And I simply want to mention to you that today's hearings, again, will have witnesses. Most of these hearings, witnesses are not initially mentioned who they are, and we haven't. And we'll have the hearings that witnesses will come, make their presentation. During their presentation, normally my colleagues on this committee and myself, we won't be interrupting them. But there could be a question that is appropriate, and any of my colleagues or myself, we might raise that question. But otherwise, after their presentation. Then we'll again have a few questions for them. And after all these presentations, then again, if my colleagues and we would like to say some comments about it, we'll do that. And on that particular note, I want to call these hearings to order. And we have a rapporteur here, Mr. Clemens, and I'm going to ask him to proceed because we'll have the witnesses, they're swearing in, and then we'll proceed with the witnesses' presentations. Mr. Clemens?
I believe it's going to be Hardam who is going to be swearing them in. So Hardam, please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Attorney Hardam Tripathi, and I am the legal counsel for ICHRRF. Today, I'll be conducting the swearing-in ceremony for all witnesses at today's hearings. So when we call your name, please raise your right hand when called, and if you choose to do so, please place your left hand on the religious book of your choice. So I'm going to be calling Dr. Richard Benkin to be sworn in at this time. Dr. Benkin, can you hear me, sir?
All right. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes, sir, I can. Yes, sir. Dr. Benkin, if you can please raise your right hand. And do you swear or solemnly affirm that the testimony you will be providing today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I will now be calling Professor Chandan Sarkar. Professor Sarkar, can you hear me?
He has not joined. Let's proceed with testimony of Dr. Benkin.
Okay.
Dr. Benkin has 10 minutes to give his presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Hold on. Everything seems to have gone off my computer. Hold on. I'm sorry, I'm having problems with my computer.
While Dr. Benkin is getting ready, I need to especially welcome my distinguished colleagues, Dr. Adityanjee and Professor Butler. And Professor Edward Butler, again, is a distinguished colleague who has been involved with the rights of indigenous people and human rights for a number of years. Again, distinguished scholar, revered teacher. I welcome both him and Dr. Adityanjee to join me on the committee. Dr. Benkin, the floor is yours.
I'm sorry, this thing keeps muting me. Am I okay again?
Yes, you are okay. You may proceed.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Were you able to hear anything I said before?
No.
All right, I'm sorry, my computer keeps knocking me out of this, so let me try again. My apologies. And my thanks to Professor Nanda and the rest of the committee. It's good to see you again, Professor.
Thank you. Wonderful to see you.
Thank you. If any of you were in the United States during the 1970s and 1980s, you would not have been able to pass a synagogue without seeing a huge banner reading "Save Soviet Jewry." Our people, our co-religionists, were being persecuted in the Soviet Union, and the American Jewish community realized if we didn't do something about it, nobody would. And so we started a massive campaign involving the entire community, from very prominent people to people you might see at the supermarket or at the office. And many of them actually traveled to the USSR to smuggle in religious books and artifacts, putting their own safety in jeopardy to let the victims know that they were not alone. And when it was all done, we got more than 1.2 million Jews out of that communist hellhole and secured new rights for those who remain. It also was an important moment for us. We realized that we did not have to accept brutal discrimination. We did not have to accept demonization of our faith and our people. It was an important point in our development. And not only do we not have to accept, nobody else has to accept that either. And stopping the ethnic cleansing of Bangladesh's Hindus can be the same moment, not only for the world's 1.1 billion Hindus, but for the rest of the world, because it could be one of the few times that the international community actually does something to save lives rather than wringing their hands when the body bags are piled too high to ignore, which is already happening there. And I want to give you an example. Former President Bill Clinton has said on many occasions that his greatest regret was not acting sooner in Rwanda, and that if he and his fellow international colleagues did so, they would have saved 300,000 lives. So are we going to sit around now? Or are we going to save perhaps 12 million lives? Because there's still that many Hindus in Bangladesh, and we saw what was happening to a lot of them recently with the Durga Puja riots. They've been reduced from 1 in 5 at the birth of a supposedly secular and liberal Bangladesh to 1 in 15 today, and it's all been done during an avalanche and through an avalanche of human rights abuses, which, by the way, I'm not going to focus on them today. They're well documented. I'm sure there are others that can talk about it too. Just know I've seen them firsthand. I've seen them myself in the villages of Bangladesh. And by the way, don't listen to those apologists that try and tell you that it's all just a bunch of radicals. And that's a lot of nonsense. Actually, attacking Hindus is something of a cottage industry in Bangladesh that's engaged in by a large swath of the population. But the real culprit, the real villain, is the Bangladesh government. That includes the first one through the current one today, who have assiduously refused to prosecute crimes against Hindus. And that's still going on. Now, I've been fighting this for almost 2 decades, whether on the ground in Bangladesh or in Washington. And there's good news. We won the first part of this battle. People know that Hindus and Hinduism are being ruthlessly suppressed in Bangladesh. Some even realize that it's part of an effort to eliminate Hindus in the country. The not so good news: the international will to do something about it is lacking, and changing that is our responsibility. Effort without results is useless, and going down any other rabbit holes is not going to help these people who are faced every day. And I've seen this and I've documented it. Murder, rape, including gang rape, child abduction. Imagine having your children taken from you, land grabs, and things that can only be described as pogroms. But realize this: the Bangladeshi government will never do the right thing because it's the right thing. They will, however, do the right thing if we make it too painful for them to continue doing the wrong thing. And the key to that is their economy, and the key to that are garment exports. Why is that important? First and foremost, for us, it's important because the United States is the world's largest customer for their garment exports. And without the buying decisions of individual Americans, their economy is trashed. Other democracies, including Germany, Canada, also contribute, but the US is by far the biggest contributor. So we have a window. Bangladeshis realize they have to diversify their economy, but they have not done so yet. Right now, a large hit on the garment industry, even a threat of such a hit, will get Bangladesh to change its ways. The only thing is we have to make sure we don't accept empty words, but accept actions only. We do have a lot of leverage. And let me mention another thing that we can do. Bangladesh is the world's largest recipient of money for providing UN peacekeeping troops and police. And who funds that? Well, I know I do, and anyone else who is an American taxpayer does also. Other countries provide a little bit, but we provide the greatest amount, which should give us more leverage. We just saw the horrendous pogroms against the Hindu community around Durga Puja in Bangladesh. So someone at the United Nations answer me, please. A country that cannot keep peace at home, why are you paying them to send people abroad to keep peace elsewhere? Doesn't make sense. Those are two pressure points that we should be hitting. But I want to tell you something else. When I first started talking to people in Washington about this, the response I got was this, pretty consistently. Richard, we believe you. You've worked with us before. We know you, what you do to verify your accusation. However, if the situation is so dire, why are we not hearing anything from the Hindu community, our Hindu constituents or others? So the key is it has to be that kind of massive effort, and let's hope it's not just a communal effort, that it's something that all good people can participate in. And I want to close with one other thing, because I assume we're going to talk about what we can do. I wanted to get an idea of just how committed the Bangladeshi government is to the ethnic cleansing of Hindus. And by the way, this is so thoroughly documented. So I took a look at what happened during its first COVID lockdown period from the end of March to the end of May last year. And here's what I found. I was able to confirm, with very high standards, I was able to confirm 85 serious multi-crime incidents targeting Hindus in that 66-day period. Let me say that again. 66 days and at least 85 serious multi-crime incidents targeting Hindus. While the Bangladeshi government enforced social distancing and other infection-reducing measures elsewhere, it did not when they were violated to attack Hindus. And it would turn a blind eye and allow them to happen. During these things, it almost never arrested people. Occasionally took people in for questioning, whenever it was, by the way. The people they took in were the small fry. They were not the people behind this, the people, the imams, the cabinet ministers, and the other high officials that are really driving the ethnic cleansing of Hindus in Bangladesh. So it's up to us, and there are really two foci. One, we have to change the behavior of the Bangladeshi government, and we have so many ways to do it. Remember that first example I gave about the saving Soviet Jewry? We were fighting the powerful Soviet Union. We're talking about Bangladesh here. There should be ways to do this. And as I said, their economy is vulnerable. The second thing is we have to fight against a tendency we seem to have towards closing our eyes to atrocities. Let's open people's eyes and let's force the Bangladeshi government to change their ways. And finally, sanction and punish attacks against Hindus. Thank you very much. I look forward to discussion later in the session.
Dr. Benkin, thank you very much for your eloquent statement. I have followed your career with a great deal of interest. All your life, you have been fighting for human rights, and I deeply appreciate that. As you mentioned that, I'll ask the first question, and then for the next 5 minutes, we might seek your advice as to how we might proceed. When you mentioned about sanctions, when you mentioned about pressure points, you mentioned the United Nations. United Nations, as you know, can be paralyzed. And sitting in the Security Council, which can only take action, it's not going to happen. So are you suggesting that we ask the United States government, especially, that has got some pressure, possibly, that can be meaningful against the Bangladesh government? Or are you asking that the civil society take action? Or are you saying that all of us should continue putting pressure on them?
Thank you, Professor Nanda. To be sure, all of us should be working. What I want to focus on, however, is the power. The power always lies with the purse, and the purse lies with the United States. I think there's precedent for preventing countries from participating in certain peacekeeping missions. I know several countries, including Bangladesh, wanted to participate in Mideast peacekeeping missions, but could not because they do not recognize one of the parties. There's precedent for doing that. And I believe if the United States threatened to withhold funds or reduce funds, you don't have to withhold them, just reduce them. Unless, unless there was some better control in who we pay to provide peacekeeping, I think that would have an impact. I would hope the United States would follow its own human rights regulations and principles and not pay people to keep peace abroad when they can't keep peace at home. That's important. But I want to also mention one other thing. I was in Dhaka in 2007 during the military coup. And in the aftermath of the coup, I spoke with some of the military leaders who told me, and this was fascinating, because the West and other major powers had believed that the 2007 election that was going to be held was not going to be free and fair, and made that clear. Things got to a point where these military leaders believed that the UN was about to join them, and if the UN joined them, the UN might then tell them they can't provide peacekeeping troops. And that was the final straw that caused the military to move.
Thank you very much, Dr. Benkin. My colleagues, Adityanjee, Dr. Butler, please go ahead.
Dr. Benkin, thank you very much indeed for your very constructive suggestions about both multilateral UN-based sanctions as well as unilateral sanctions, perhaps by United States. Would you envisage also economic sanctions from European Union, because that's one of the biggest trading partners of Bangladesh? Any comments, sir?
Yes, and I think there are two ways to look at this. One is the formal sanction avenue, as you have just described, and you are absolutely correct, because after the United States, Germany is then the largest importer of Bangladeshi garments. So yes, that's very important. However, there's another way to go as well, and maybe this is kind of the street fighting sort of thing that I'm used to. Walmart is a huge purchaser, the largest purchaser of Bangladeshi garments. If Walmart felt that their continued purchases or the level of their purchases would have them marked by many of their customers and potential customers as supporters of ethnic cleansing, they might reduce that, or they might tell Bangladeshi government that they will only maintain their imports if in fact something is done about the human rights situation. And I only mentioned Walmart. There are many, many other companies, the Gap, Van Heusen. I mean, you just go on and on and on. So in other words, I think there are two ways we can handle this. One is the formal government or UN sanction, right? And the other is the on-the-ground protest pressure to companies that import Bangladeshi garments.
So thank you very much. Dr. Butler? Dr. Butler, have you any question?
I think we have lost him. We can move on to the next witness.
All right. I think before we go, I need to mention, in conjunction with what you said, and that is that last time when that building fell, and along with that, many people in Bangladesh in the garment industry died. At that time, many of these corporations in Europe, in the United States, in Asia, they put a great deal of pressure on Bangladesh. And after that, at least an effort was made that there be some action by the government in order to see that the buildings are safe and people who work in garment industry, they are safely working in those conditions. All right, thank you very much, Dr. Benkin. And next is Professor Chandan Sarkar.
All right. At this time, the committee will call the witness, Mr. Utsav Chakraborti.
Is that right?
Yes, sir. I believe that
Go
Professor
ahead.
Sarkar.
I think
That's correct.
that's fine.
Sarkar has difficulty joining, connectivity issue. So we are.
I'm here. Utsav is here.
All right, Mr. Chakraborti, if you could please raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear or solemnly affirm that the testimony you will be providing today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. You may begin.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you for hosting this very much needed hearing. I'm going to speak from the perspective of a much needed redressal that will probably, and I won't say probably, but would certainly help in ensuring that future atrocities against Hindu and other religious minorities in Bangladesh are lessened and to some extent removed. The case that I'll be making for is a global recognition for the much documented, much talked about genocide of 1971. The reason I want to make this case is because unlike many other genocides of that scale that have happened over the past decades, there is no formal recognition of the 1971 genocide that was perpetrated by the Pakistani state, its army, and its collaborators within Bangladesh with such a scale of death and destruction that every other genocide of that scale and much, much lesser scales have been rightly recognized. So this is the case I want to put forward. Genocide is defined in Article 2 of the Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of Crimes of Genocide 1946 as an act of the following committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a nation, ethnicity, race, or religious group. As such, killing members of the group causing serious bodily or mental harm to the members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring the children of the group to another group. Now, what happened in 1971? In March 1971, the government of Pakistan and its supporters in Bangladesh, the Jamaat-e-Islami, as well as other aligned radical Islamist groups, launched a violent operation codenamed Operation Searchlight to crush all pro-liberation activities. General Yahya Khan, the military dictator of Pakistan, while speaking to his top military brass, famously said, "Kill 3 million of them and the rest will eat out of our hands." And 3 million they did kill. Bengalis who opposed Islamists, mostly Hindus, including were murdered, mostly by the Al-Shams and the Al-Badr Brigade. 10 million people, 90% of whom were Hindus, were turned destitute and forced to seek refuge in India. Declassified communiques from June 1971, which later became famous as the Blood Telegrams, named after the dissenting Foreign Service officer posted at the American consulate in Dhaka, uses the term selective genocide and genocide clearly to describe these killings. Field reports of the US government, countless eyewitness journalists, reports of international agencies such as the World Bank, and additional information available to the subcommittee documenting the reign of terror also clearly point to a summary execution of the Hindu population with an effort to grab their land and to exterminate them. This is what Senator Edward Kennedy said in his report on November 1, 1971 to the US Senate Judiciary Committee. one tale that is widely believed and reported, this is from the New York Times, is that 563 Hindu women were picked up by the army in March and April and held in military brothels and were not released until the end of the war. This is a report from Malcolm Brown from New York Times. Now, the second part of my testimony. Were any of the perpetrators in this description brought to justice? On 17th April 1973, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Mujibur Rahman, announced to try 195 Pakistani army perpetrators for the crime. However, the perpetrators were not in Bangladesh, and they were protected by the Geneva Convention because they were in India under the protection of the Indian Army because of the defeat of the Pakistani army in Bangladesh. So none of those 195 Pakistani military officials were tried. And because of that, not one person who officially served in the Pakistani army paid the price for the crimes they committed against humanity. We have the names of all those 195 officials that are still living today. While a few Islamist collaborators who were in Bangladesh were tried and later meted out justice, most of the criminals and war criminals who were from Pakistan continue to live a free and fair life in their own country as well as abroad. Many of them own properties in London and New York. It is my request to the global community that we, as in the American state, as well as countries in EU, apply sanctions on Pakistan if they refuse to give up these war criminals for a tribunal that would be monitored by the international community with Hindu participation. I would also suggest that individuals within Pakistan that had any connection to these acts in 1971 be put under Magnitsky sanctions, thereby seizing any of their property and travel options outside Pakistan. With that, I end my testimony.
Mr. Chakraborti, I deeply appreciate your harking back to the genocide of 1971. We had held hearings once before many years ago, and at that time, the two issues that were brought against those Bangladeshi perpetrators were the crimes against humanity and war crimes. And at that time, I raised the issue of genocide, but genocide was not brought at that time a charge against them. And I'm delighted that you have mentioned it, having for many years teaching genocide. I totally agree with you. And I think at this stage, what suggestion that you have, that pressure we put on Pakistan, how realistic do you think that suggestion at the present time is?
I think it is very realistic because it is one of the most well-documented atrocities that has not been recognized within the US, with bipartisan records, both in the Senate and the House, that clearly point to the numbers and the victims. It is also important because many of the crimes that are committed against the religious minorities in Bangladesh today are committed because of the feeling of impunity that the crime committers have going back all the way to 1971. Not just in Bangladesh, but also in countries like Afghanistan and in India, especially in Jammu and Kashmir. Many of the perpetrators of similar acts, maybe not to the same scale, are done because the people who commit those acts, including officials within Pakistan that were involved in the Mumbai terror attacks, always believe that they can get away with it because they could get away in 1971. That has to stop. That record has to be set straight. And sanctions, even though belated, similar to the ones that were put on Serbia in the 1990s, as well as on Turkey in the recent past, would ensure that the committers of the crime in the future will know that they will not be able to get away with it, even if a generation has passed.
Let me understand. Are you suggesting that these sanctions be done unilaterally by countries? Or are you suggesting that the world community collectively does that? If it's going to be done collectively, who does it? Is it the United Nations? Is it any other intergovernmental body that ought to do that? How would it really happen? That's why I ask, being realistic.
I believe that it should start from unilateral positions from countries which have a significant heft in the world community, like the United States and possibly countries in the EU, because that begins the process of addressing this issue, and that also makes sure that this is not held down by multilateral bureaucracies, including like those in the UN. If the United States is able to unilaterally recognize this as a genocide, the steps that will happen next will ensure that there is global recognition, and there will be countries around the world who will take these steps in future. Once this has been accepted at similar strategically important countries, it would be the next step to go to multilateral agencies and then try to impose the similar sanctions. But the sanctions, therefore, are important.
Thank you, Mr. Chakraborti. I think I have many more questions that I might ask offline. But Dr. Adityanjee.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chakraborti, for giving very helpful suggestions, specifically about 1971 genocide. But if we recapitulate the history of that part of the world, there was a genocide starting in 1946 onwards. That was supplemented by a genocide in 1971. And we are having a continuing slow genocide at this point in time in territory of Bangladesh. So there are three important events. And Mr. Chakraborti, are you just focusing on 71 genocide, or you would like 1946 genocide and the current ongoing slow genocide also to be recognized and sanctioned?
What I'm suggesting is that the scale and the magnitude and the scale and the record of what happened in March 1971 to December 1971 is the most recognized, the most easily and tangibly recorded. Therefore, recognition of that through international bodies and through countries, which would match and sometimes much oversize the scales of similar violent genocide that have been recognized, like those in Rwanda, those in Armenia, and those in Serbia, in Sarajevo and Bosnia conflict. That would ensure that this thing is recorded first. The other genocide, which are slow and steady pogroms that have started from 1946 in Noakhali all the way to now, would automatically find more recognition thereafter, because the core and the fundamental genocide that happened in those 6 months will provide the impetus for recognition of these future pogroms.
Thank you very much. Dr. Butler, Adityanjee, is Dr. Butler there or not today?
He is not able to join.
He is not able to join. All right. And Adityanjee, any other question you might have?
I don't have any other question. Our previous witness, Professor Chandan Sarkar, is able to join now. So
all right. And I have one more question for Dr. Butler. And Dr. Butler, as Chakraborti, you eloquently have presented this suggestion for 1971, especially because it's very well documented. Should the International Commission take the initiative in order to reach out to the United States first, or to European countries, or what country would you suggest that we focus our attention at and send a note that action be taken?
I would request the Honorable Commission to reach out to the United States governments first, and then reach out to countries in the region like India, like Russia, and like China thereafter, to request them to recognize this. The United States is critical to this recognition because the United States Congress is already on record, thanks to Senator Ted Kennedy's testimony in 1971, and 1972. It is a small step, and the Honorable Commission's role in validating and reminding the United States on this issue will play a very significant role in any future recognition of this genocide.
But thank you very much, because India, Russia, China, on geopolitical setting, may not be able initially to take this suggestion seriously.
I understand.
Act on them, but I think the United States certainly is one where the initial pressure can be built. Thank you very, very much. I deeply appreciate your being with us. Next, I'm going to ask that Mr. Tripathi kindly continue with swearing in.
Thank you, Professor Nanda. This is Attorney Tripathi. This is a question that we received from the private chat for Mr. Chakraborti. The question is a two-parted question, sir. The U.S. just sanctioned Bangladesh's elite paramilitary force, Rapid Action Battalion. What is the impact of these sanctions, and how can it be refocused for greater impact?
My understanding of the recent sanctions on the Bangladesh Rapid Action Battalion, RAB, is that it, in most likelihood, will not affect the security of the Hindu communities in any manner. In fact, the organizations that were involved in lobbying for the sanctions on the Rapid Action Battalion, many of them are known to be extremely antagonistic towards the Hindu minorities in Bangladesh. And in fact, many of them have been targeted legally or illegally by the Rapid Action Battalion because sometimes they indulge in violent activities against the religious minorities in this country. So in my personal opinion, it will not impact the security of the Hindus at all. In fact, whether right or wrong, these sanctions might actually embolden the the violent religious groups in Bangladesh to act against Hindus even more. That is my personal understanding and opinion.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tripathi, we can go to the next witness.
Yes, sir. At this time, the committee calls Professor Chandan Sarkar to be sworn in. Professor Sarkar, if you could please raise your right hand.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay, sir?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Do you swear or solemnly affirm that the testimony you will be providing today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir. You may proceed.
Thank you very much. I'm just very pleased and happy to have here. So I'm just listening to Mr. Chakraborti, wonderful, and I'm going for a recent few activities. That is what is going on here in Bangladesh. I'm just sharing with you. This is the month of December, where actually 30 lakhs people actually sacrificed their life, and then 4 lakhs women have been brutally raped. That's why we just independent in Bangladesh. And the COVID period of time, here is a 5.7 million people actually died in all over the world, and Bangladesh in 27, so 28,000 almost. And here in this month, actually, I am just sharing with you some facts regarding the recent. In our constitutions, actually allow to us the freedom of religious. Every citizen has to right to process, practice, and propagate any religious. And every religious community actually there's just established, maintain, and manage its religious institutes. But what actually we see that discriminations on the ground, no one actually discriminate due to their sex and then regards their origin. But what we see in the Pakistan introduced in 1965 to 1969 Act, there was the Enemy Property Acts. And then, after the 1971, actually we independent, but still that act was still, and then it is removed 2013. So many Hindu peoples are affected by this state discriminatory law act, and then still we are not just getting the land back. And then you see recently actually our Indian president actually visited Bangladesh, and that is the temple in the Ramna temple, which is demolished 27 March in 1971, and it is the burnt reality. Over there is thousands people has brutally killed and then burned them, destroyed the temple. But after the independence, no one actually come forward to establish and then build up this one is this temple. But that was the actually symbol of Bangladesh actually that period of time. But no one can come. But is India actually come to build that one? We are happy. So now in a Muslims and Hindus community, you see 2.285% Muslim communities increase from 1951 to 2020, 2011 last census. But whereas the Hindus now declining from 22% to like 8.5% in 2011. And then, you know, if this is the going on, this like actually percentage is declining, then 2050 Hindus will be 7.3 and tends to 0. January in 2000, January to October 2021, you know, that is the fire in houses in Hindus house in 182. Fire in business actually 57, fire at temple actually almost 187, land grabbing 22, injured almost 287, killed actually 17, and family attacked is 7. And 2020, from 2015 to 2020, we see rape and killing. Raped actually 2020 it was 47, killed was 2020 was 147, land grabbing was almost 10,000 hectares, and then 2000 is a Pratima demolished almost 400. And then, you know, all of you, the recent actually atrocities are in the started from Kumila. It's last in October, and then we visited also over there Kumila, Noakhali, and Rangpur, and financial loss actually is a 3.227 crore. Not only for that, they demolished each and everything, and then they destroyed the hope and others. Like this is actually atrocities, recent atrocity in October. And in the 13 October 2021 actually started for the issues of the fake one is a like a news, and that is the propaganda is going on. They just targeted for the Hindus, you know, like for a fake news is they just I think like use the fake IDs, or anyone can anytime just use like that is that they insult the for Muhammad, and then they just targeted Hindus, not only for an individual person but on the whole communities. And we saw that Dilip Dash, her daughter actually told to us that Dilip Dash was actually like they just hit it by the sharp weapons, and then after a few days he just died. Another is Udhir, 80 years old. He just I think you saw the panic, and then Chanmoy Kalim temple when the just fanatics is attacked, and due to saw this he just stroke, and then he died. And then that is a Chanmoy sample in a day. That is 3 times like they just fanatics attacked 10:30 a.m. Second was a 1:30 p.m. and third one was the 3 to 4:30 p.m. Noakhali also is the same. Noakhali is ISKCON temple. Prabhu's also told to us that is the Swami Ratneshwar. That is Devnath Prabhu, who actually head of the ISKCON temples at Noakhali. That is the fanatics actually is 12 to 20 years. And that period of time when he was taking the food, so many females were in the temple, and then they just I think hide in the first floor, and then they go in the inside the like blankets, and then they just brutally killed Ratan Shah, you know, Pranto Das, and they injured Nimai Prabhu, sent to Devnath and Kartik Shah. And one what actually I'm going to tell you, all of you, Facebook rumors. So this is at any time in Bangladesh, that is anyone can fall in a trouble. Like suppose we are here is like if anyone like feel okay, Chandan or others one is here, that is the targeted. So tomorrow will be just I think use the fake Facebook posts and insult the Hazrat Muhammad or anyone. So they just I think target, and then not only in a single person. Again, I'm telling to you, that is that they destroy whole villages, as business established, each and everything. And that is the another thing is the Digital Act. Digital Act actually especially affected journalists and Hindus also. 2018 to 2021, 1,560 cases has been filed under this act, and 142 was journalists, 35 teachers, and 184 politicians, and 7 is students. And I'm sharing few students. You see, on October 16, 2021, Gourango De has been arrested under this act. And in Ashit Borman Dash village, Daulatpur Upazila, Shalla is same. I say in September, Ruma Sarkar in October, was a professor of Bego Badrunnasa under this act. Jivan Bhumik, 31st October 2020. Shubhan Puritush. So another is a like important issues is a like if anyone write anything against the teacher or students, and then institutes also like without anything, then and there they just I think fire and from the institutes. So they are actually they are not a judgment. Before that, their first duty they fire from the institute. After that, they have to just I think check is it true or wrong. So this is going on in like Bangladesh right now. And that is the started from 2012 to Ramu from 2021 in the like 22 districts. Even in Kumilla, 4 times they attacked the forest. Same issues.
Professor Sarkar, please conclude your presentation. Thank you for all these statistics and the evidence, and we deeply appreciate it.
Yes, and I'm just telling we just like the world communities, and then our government should come forward to establish the minorities ministry commission. One world community must have to just come forward to establish the human rights in Bangladesh for Hindus. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sarkar, I have no question, but simply one inquiry from you about the suggestion for this commission. What action would you suggest the commission take?
Like suppose at least, like if the commissions and ministry, then they just come forward and then visit the like Hindu villages. They just because if like any law and order you see in a like a Kumilla in a marsh, so sorry Shalla in Shunamganj, like one is a Jumundash. 7 times bail has been rejected. So what I'm going to tell, if we have a commission and ministry, at least minority will be safe. They come forward and they're asking for justice as well as that is our budget. They have a specific allocations money for that. So they just do something for Hindus, what I'm just telling.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Adityanjee?
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Chandan Sarkar, for giving the details of ongoing atrocities on minorities in Bangladesh. Could you give the Commission some information about usurping of the properties belonging to minorities under the Vested Properties Act of Bangladesh? Very briefly, please.
Yes, actually, that is what I'm just, I think, telling you only for a 10% return back and 90%. So we are not getting back, although this law actually government has demolished for in a new act. But this is not actually is a fulfill what actually we want from the government. Vested property is actually is what I feel is not working at all.
Thank you very much, Professor Sarkar. And I am going to request now Mr. Tripathi for the next witness, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sarkar, for your time. The commission now at this time calls Mr. Dipan Mitra for swearing in. Mr. Mitra, if you could please raise your right hand. Mr. Mitra, do you swear or solemnly affirm that the testimony you will be providing today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, yes. Got it.
All right, sir, you may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone actually for arranging the hearing regarding the issue of persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh. So my previous speaker already mentions almost everything regarding the issue of the genocide of Hindus in 1971, and Professor Sarkar already mentions the recent atrocities during the Durga Puja in October 2021. What was happening in Bangladesh? Yeah. So I'm not going in deep records or data because already mentioned. You already mentioned here. So I'm going why the incident is going on, because you know before 19 at least before sorry after 1947 Hindus are always targeted because the countries and other Muslim communities, they want to grab their lands, they want to convert the Hindus to Muslims, and this is their main interest. Yeah, to attack Hindus, because if they attack Hindus, Hindus will left country and they can easily grab the land. And already mentions the what is the Enemy Property Act. After 1965 war, Pakistan government promulgated the Enemy Property Act and they grabbed more than 2.7 million hectares of Hindu land. And after the independence of 1971, government changed this act, renamed Vested Property Act. But act was same. And in 2001, the Omili government restored this act, but it was totally nothing than an eyewash. But not a single land was returned to the Hindus, because and another issues is that the the Professor Sarkar mentions the during the Durga Puja what is happening. Yeah, already mentions the more than 325 temples are vandalized and demolished, and more than 1,500 Hindu houses are burnt, demolished during the Durga Puja in Bangladesh 2021. Oh, so, but after the attacks, I am very grateful to you, the whole international community. They raise the issues and they protest the rally. But Bangladesh government arrested the many people. Already mentions the name. I mentioned the name Professor Ruma Sarkar, Paritosh Roy, Shobhan Kumar Das, Kartik Chandra Roy, Mrityunjay Majumdar, Ashish Mollik, Shobhan Das, and Oshit Baron Das, and another Hindus are arrested after the attacks of in October, because government want to create a threat and fear among the Hindus. If they can create a fear and pressure to the Hindus, then Hindus will not create any voice. If Hindus are silent, then the international community couldn't know what is happening in Bangladesh. So this, by the name of insulting Islam, by the name of discrediting Islam, uh, anybody can target it, any Hindus, and they can create a fake Facebook ID or anyone, and then they attack Hindus. And it is continuing, and but not in respect of any political parties coming power. The situation of Hindus is not going better, but I think the atrocities against Hindus is increasing day by day. If you see in 2021, the attacks on Sharla, the attacks on Shaili village, the attacks on Muradnagar, and at last attacks on during the Durga Puja. It started from Kumilla, and these attacks more than 35 districts was affected. Yeah. So these attacks is increasing day by day, and the number of Hindus is declining. In 1971, the nearly 28% are Hindus in Bangladesh, but this number is decreasing, and nearly at most 8.5% Hindus are staying in Bangladesh. And if the situation is continuing, Professor Abul Barakat, he is a professor of Dhaka University. According to his research, he mentions that after 30 years, not a single Hindu will be left in Bangladesh. So I have some suggestion what we can do forward, because Mr. Benkin already mentions Bangladesh is a garments industry. It's a very big industry for Bangladesh economy, and they export the garments item to US and European Union. So then US and European Union can dialogue with the Bangladesh government and pressure with Bangladesh government. If you didn't provide any rights for the minorities, if you couldn't provide any justifications for that, then we can stop to import any garments items. And another already mentions the Bangladesh provide a large scale of armies in UN peacekeeping missions. But in Bangladesh, there is no peace. There is no rights for minorities. But how the Bangladesh can provide a large number of armies for the UN peacekeeping missions? So I request you.
Mr. Mitra, please conclude your presentation.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
So I'm just two comments to the unit. Please raise the issue in UN and European Parliament regarding the issue of persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh, and you provide raise the issues for refugee status of minority Hindus, because Hindus are always targeted and they have no hopes in Bangladesh. So you raise the issues for provides the refugee status and immigration for the Bangladeshi Hindus who are affected by the extremist group. And one issue that fortunately I am here now. I'm in Paris. I have already joined a conference in European Parliament regarding the issue of persecution of minorities of Hindus in Bangladesh on 14th and 15th December this year, and I presented my report and submitted the documents regarding the issue of persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Adityanjee.
Thank you, Mr. Dipan Mitra, for your report. I have just one question for you. These atrocities against minorities in Bangladesh, are they specific to Hindus, or they are also towards Buddhists, the Chakma tribals, and Christians also?
Yes, main targeted are Hindus, and then the ethnic communities, especially in hill tracts area, they are targeted, and but Christian community as much very few, so they are targeted by the extremist group or any government in Bangladesh, but mainly target Hindus and then ethnic communities in Bangladesh.
So
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And Mr. Tripathi, we can go to the next witness, please.
Yes, sir. At this time, the Commission calls Ms. Aarti Agarwal to be sworn in. Ms. Agarwal, if you could please raise your right hand.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Do you swear or solemnly affirm that the testimony you will be providing today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
You may proceed, ma'am. Thank you for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen of the committee and everyone present, I thank you for providing me this opportunity to speak in your midst. I am Aarti Agarwal, an author and researcher and director of ICHRRF Sansthapak Foundation, India. I have worked extensively on documenting violations of Hindu human rights around the world. I'm here today to bring to your attention the gross violations of human rights of the Hindu minorities of Bangladesh. Bangladesh as a country has seen violations of Hindu human rights since the very inception of the state. The 1971 war saw the brutal murder of at least 2.5 million Hindus, the mass exodus of at least 8 million Hindus, and the rapes of at least 200,000 Hindu women, who were all selectively targeted by the Pakistan army and extremists based on their religious identity. Since the formation of the state, the population of Hindus in Bangladesh has been dwindling, down to 8.5% as per the 2011 census, from 18.5% in the 1961 census. As per the studies of Dr. Barakat from 1964 to 2013, approximately 11.3 million Hindus left Bangladesh due to religious persecution. At least 22 indigenous groups have disappeared from the country. Shantu Larma, the chairman of CHT Regional Council, claims that over 50 indigenous groups are on the verge of extinction. Bangladeshi Hindus have faced 3,679 attacks in 9 years. That is more than an attack per day on average for 9 years at a stretch. This shocking pattern of ethnic cleansing has continued unabated for years, and the recent wave of violence against Hindus from 13th to 24th of October 2021 it is an example of what Hindus face in Bangladesh. Starting Durga Puja, Hindu religious festival, more than 14 Hindus were brutally murdered. At least 1,650 homes were vandalized and arsoned. At least 343 Hindu temples were vandalized and gutted. More than 26 Hindu women were raped, including minor girls. Women had no role to play in this conflict, real or imagined. When women are raped based on their religious identity, it is an act of hate and hate alone. This type of ethnic cleansing is reminiscent of the persecution of the Jewish community by the Nazis in the 1930s, right before the complete Holocaust. Ignoring this persecution is tantamount to ignoring the persecution of the Jews in the 1930s. Non-recognition of ethnic cleansing facilitates further genocides. When a person is murdered or raped, it is not merely that person alone who suffers. The lives of all those who love them are affected. The trajectory of their lives is altered forever for generations together. And it is not one person we are talking of here. The numbers are in millions. Even those who are not directly touched by the violence are terrorized and live in fear of their lives forever. Hindus in Bangladesh today live in abject poverty. This is not because of lack of skills or perseverance. It is because of decades of persecution and discrimination faced by them, generation after generation. Crossing national boundaries with only the bare essentials on your back is an act of desperation, a desperate attempt to save your life. These are people who are migrating into an unknown country on foot without any resources. They have nothing to look forward to, no future, no rights, no guarantee of being given refuge. They do it as a last resort just to live. It is worth noting that the Bangladeshi Hindu immigrants in India do not have the legal status or rights of a refugee, even though they are migrating only to save their lives. I asked the ICHRRF to rectify this. When perpetrators go unpunished, it is a strong signal to their supporters to continue the heinous crimes, thus forming a vicious cycle of crime and no punishment, in which Hindus remain trapped. Today, I demand justice for every single life lost. I'm sharing with you a report on the heinous acts of violence committed against Hindu minorities in Bangladesh in October 2021, which includes the data and information I have mentioned in my address. I sincerely hope that you will peruse it, give official recognition to the ethnic cleansing of Bangladeshi Hindus, and take action as described in my report to bring justice to my bereaved and beleaguered Hindu brethren in Bangladesh. And with this, I end my testimony. Thank you.
Aarti Agarwal ji, thank you very much. As you mentioned, what action are you suggesting that this commission take? And before that, I simply wanted to ask you if you or your organization, either one of you has reached out to the government of India or to the government of Bangladesh, and what answers, what kind of action have they taken, what responses have they given?
Right. Thank you, sir. So I do not want to be repetitive. So apart from what has already been suggested on the panel by the previous speakers, I want to suggest actions like legal status as a refugee to the Bangladeshi Hindu immigrants in India, and support, financial support for them to rebuild their lives. So as I mentioned, at least 1,650 homes have been vandalized in Bangladesh. Now these people are homeless, they're penniless, they do not have any form of support, including financial support. So I also ask one international community to support these people to rebuild their lives and their temples, to rebuild their temples as well. And I think other people have already talked about recognition of genocide of the 1971 war crimes, but I also want recognition for continued ethnic cleansing of Bangladeshi Hindus in Bangladesh. For the work of my organization, we have been documenting the human rights violations in different countries. And we do publish reports, we do bring attention to Indian officials, but so far, we have not received any positive response.
Well, thank you very much. Adityanjee?
Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Agarwal, detailing the sexual atrocities targeted against minority Hindu populations in Bangladesh. The data you presented is enormous. It is, eye-opening for any civilized society. I do take your point that Indian government should provide refugee status and financial assistance to these refugees who are escaping atrocities from Bangladeshi society. Would you also like United Nations Office of Refugees to give these people refugee status in addition to Government of India, so that there is proper identification and proper documentation and an assembly of supports and wraparound services around these unfortunate victims of sexual violence?
Yes, sir. So I would recommend that apart from the Indian government, United Nations, as well as USCIRF, give the legal status as a refugee to these immigrants who continue to face, hardships wherever they go. So their misery is not over with the violence they face. They continue to live a life of complete penury and hardship. And giving them this legal status and the rights of a refugee will at least help them rebuild their lives.
Well, thank you very much. I think we can move on. Deeply appreciated. Move on to the next witness, Mr. Tripathi.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. The commission now calls Professor Dwijen Bhattacharjya to be sworn in. May you please raise your right hand. Professor Bhattacharjya, do you swear or solemnly affirm that the testimony you'll be providing today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir. You may proceed.
Mr. Chair, distinguished witnesses, and dear attendees, before I start, I must acknowledge one little thing here. Professor Nanda came to one of our meetings in Montreal in 2005 on December 20th, and what he said there about the situation of minorities in Bangladesh still reverberates in my ears. Good morning. The title of my presentation is The Existential Threat Facing Bangladesh's Religious and Ethnic Minorities, as well as its democracy, due to the government policy of appeasing the Islamists. Now, if you could allow me to share my screen, I would like to play one video clip.
To the distinguished gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Dole. Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. Since 1947, 49 million Hindus in Bangladesh have gone missing, according to Professor Sachi Distar. And a recent Hindu American Foundation report concluded that the Hindus of Bangladesh continue to be victims of daily acts of murder, rape, kidnapping, temple destruction, and physical intimidation. Dr. Richard Benkin, an authority on human rights abuses in Bangladesh, has described to me on several occasions the atrocities and human rights abuses suffered by Bangladeshi's Hindus that he personally has verified. Other groups like the Christian Assyrians.
So, thank you. I would like to show a couple of one more video clip, and then I'll proceed. Can you see my screen?
We can't.
You can't. Okay. Okay, let me see. Just 1 second. Okay, so can you see the headline of this newspaper?
Yes, we do, from Dhaka Tribune.
Dhaka Tribune 2016, and Professor Barakat has been referred to more than one testifiers today. And he's a famous economist, statistician, and has extensive research on Bangladeshi minorities. It's like 30 years of research and multiple published books. And he says, no Hindus will be left after 30 years in Bangladesh. And he has 30, it's based on his current rate of exodus, which is 774 people per day. So now, I had many other things to show you, the scales of atrocities, but I'll read them out to you because the delineation part has been extremely well done by the other speakers, reducing my burden, and I'll focus mainly on the solutions. So Bangladesh's religious and ethnic minorities and its secular democracy are both facing existential threat from the Islamists. By conducting a sustained campaign of discrimination, mental persecution, violence against the country's religious and ethnic minority, Hindu, Buddhist, and Christians, Ahmadiyya Muslims, Sufi Muslims, and the mystic singers known as the Bauls, with complete legal impunity and direct or indirect logistical assistance provided by successive governments, the Islamists have eliminated and forced tens of millions of minorities from the country. This vicious campaign of ethnic cleansing has included blatant discrimination, daily humiliation, looting and burning down of their dwelling houses and businesses, land grabbing, eviction, desecration and destruction of deities and temples, brutal torture, arson, kidnapping followed by rape and forced conversion, mass rape, burning people alive, and grisly murders. According to various reliable reports, incidents of minority persecution, which include intimidation, eviction, land grabbing, etc., the minorities have been subjected to nearly 3,710 attacks since 2013. I'm reporting from Hindustan Times, Deutsche Welle Radio, Ain or Shalish Kendra, Bangladesh, Law and Mediation Center. In the last few years, the frequency of attacks has increased manifold. This escalation in violence has accelerated the process of minority exodus, resulting in a steady decline in their representation in the population, which in turn has hastened the process of transforming the country into another monolithic Islamic state like Afghanistan or Pakistan. The first time in history, after the recent spate of violence during the holiest of Hindus' religious festivals, Durga Puja, the Prime Minister for the first time in history took to the TV and promised to take serious action against the minorities, against the criminals. But a few days later, she had her Foreign Minister, Momen, put out a statement in the Foreign Ministry website all but denying that anything happened at all. We were not surprised at all because the minority persecution has always been denied, and the victims of persecution have always been denied justice. Except for 2 or 3 cases, no minority persecutor has ever been prosecuted and punished since the country was born in 1971. At the directive of the High Court, Prime Minister Hasina had instituted a commission called the Sahabadin Judge Commission. The commission submitted its report, which has a list of several thousand criminals who perpetrated crimes against Bangladesh's minorities, but the Prime Minister has refused to even publish the report in the form of a gazette, lot less starting the prosecuting and punishing them. The reason for this is that the victims are minorities, they're non-Muslims. Regardless of which political party or coalition parties may have been in power, this vicious campaign of ethnic cleansing has raged relentlessly. Each government has discriminated against them in employment, denied them justice, and seized 2.8 million acres of land through the Enemy Property Act, subsequently renamed Vested Property Act, euphemistically. Now, unless the minorities had to leave Bangladesh since 1946, the Noakhali pogrom of Hindus, the population today would have been 75 million more than the 18 million that remain. As I showed you, based on his analysis of their current rate of exodus, Professor Barakat predicted no Hindus will be left in Bangladesh in 30 years. Now, having said that, I'll now tell you the reasons, 3 reasons why this is happening. 1, Bangladesh's 2 major parties, Awami League and BNP, have made strategic partnership with the Islamists in order to go to power and retain it. Please recall that in 1948, when Awami League was born, its name was Awami Muslim League. They dropped it only in order to be able to gain the support of 31% of the population at that time. Recently, in recent years, in order to do the same thing, win a potential free and fair election, they have partnered with Hafazat Islam, which is all but transformed the identity of the Bengali people, which was linguistically based. It was a linguistically based ethnic identity. They are now going back to pre-partition, which is a Muslim national identity. That process is all but complete. Number 2, successive government has failed to prosecute or punish even the officially identified minority persecutors. In other words, granting them total legal impunity and even directly assisting them by sending police or paramilitary forces. I recall on April 10, 1992, the paramilitary forces systematically wiped out a village in Chittagong Hill Tracts, killing 600 people. And I have a document here, but I don't have enough time. That's a document signed by 17 US congressmen, including our Nancy Pelosi, urging Khaleda Zia to address the situation. Nothing has been done. Number 3, government's promotion of Wahhabi Islam in Bangladesh consistently, recently by building 560 mosques and allowing them, the Qaumi Madrasa people, to denigrate the Hindu non-Muslims by comparing and likening them to animals, dog, pig, and even suggesting they have competence deficit. These are the 3 reasons. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now go to the solutions. And I believe this should be a cause for concern in Washington, D.C. If I mention the strength of them, you know that I have a slide here to show that the American Taliban, John Walker Lynch, saying to CNN reporter that a full brigade of Bangladeshi, Bengali-speaking brigade fought alongside Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan in 1990, late 1990s and early 2000, when Bangladesh resembled a Taliban state, semi-Taliban state. So what are the resolutions? First of all, there are two sets of resolution. The first set can be implemented by Sheikh Hasina quickly because in Bangladesh, there is no crossing of party lines. Whatever she says, everybody has to vote for it. So as I said, the atrocities has been conducted with the support of the government. Now, if they don't grant them impunity, therefore, I urge the world international community and your organization to ask in no uncertain terms, both parties, that they sever ties with the Islamic political parties, namely Jamaat-e-Islam, Hafazat-e-Islam, and Jamaat-e-Islam's ferocious student wing called the Islamic Chhatra Shibir, which start radicalizing the preteen youth in their high school years. So these three can be banned by the US government, like the banned Huji and Jamatul Mujahideen. Then, okay, and then she can reinstate the original constitution of 1972, stop promoting Wahhabi Islam, produce a white paper on the status of the minorities, like something like Sarkar Commission of India, create Ministry of Minority Affairs, National Minority Commission, separate Hindu, Buddhist, and Christian foundations, the way the father of the nation created Islamic Foundation in 1974, but not for the other minorities, etc. So I'll now skip to the second part, which is this set of recommendation is for the leaders of the civilized democratic nations and the United Nations Secretary General. Please ask both parties of Awami League, as I said, to sever relationship. Both Prime Minister Hasina, Khaleda Jia has to be asked, and then the international community has to ask them to do that too. Number two, please ask Prime Minister Hasina and her military commanders to stop the process of denigrating the non-Muslims and inciting common Muslims to waz and khutbas by strictly regulating them and requiring Qaumi madrasas to follow the regular school curriculum. Please call upon the Secretary General of the United Nations to have a dialogue with Bangladesh's Army Chief of Staff, the Chief of Police and Rapid Action Battalion RAB, the Inspector General of Police, and the Home Minister, and tell them in no uncertain terms that in order for Bangladeshi soldiers and army and police officers to qualify for the highly lucrative UN peacekeeping forces jobs, they must end violence against the country's religious and ethnic minorities. Please call upon the United Nations, USAID, and all other agencies to halt participations with Jamaat-e-Islami, Hafazat-e-Islam, and the Islamic foundations of Islamic fundamental extremist organizations. Please ask all the donor nations financial aid to Bangladesh, including the GSP trade benefit given by the United States, to be tied to ending violence against the Bangladesh's minorities. These are my main recognition. I also want you and the world body to recognize the 46 pogrom, starting with 46 pogrom of the Hindus through 1971 genocide as a genocide. And then this is what I want to say to conclude my paper. Saving the remaining 18 million or so religious and ethnic minorities of Bangladesh is a moral obligation on the part of the United States and all other civilized democratic nations. And as a Bangladeshi American, I believe containing Islamic extremism in Bangladesh is particularly in America's own interest because the United States of America is every Islamic jihadist's primary target. And we have already seen dozens of radicalized Bangladeshi jihadists have acted to hurt American interests on its soil. I'm almost done. Bangladesh's religious and ethnic minorities deserve your assistance, sir. They need not beg for it. And this is, when I say this, I'm quoting Professor Prakash Nanda, what he said 20 years in 2005 in our meeting. Survival with human dignity and safety of their women folks, life and property is their human right. They need not beg for it. It is our moral obligation to make sure that they are not denied them. I fervently hope the leaders of the community of civilized nations, the United Nations, the donor nations, and human rights organizations such as yours will take my recommendation seriously. I want to say, echoing Selig Harrison, who appealed to the US government and its lawmakers in 2006, I believe. Quote, get a grip on Dhaka, end quote, and start, quote, do not write of democracy in Bangladesh yet. I can assure you it is still an attainable goal without firing a single shot, single bullet, or a huge financial commitment. How do I know? In 2008, America, United Nations, and India working together with the caretaker government practically headed by General Moin did just that. They reversed the dangerous course Bangladesh had taken under the leadership of BNP and Jamaat-e-Islami, and the same can be done again. Now, if you go to the United Nations now or the Foreign Relations Committee, they talk about making space for the opposition party. Sure, that's a good thing. If you do that, let's say the currently ruling government is an autocratic government. So who will come to power? BNP and Jamaat. Deja vu. We saw that in 2001 and 2005. Bangladesh became a veritable hell. It will happen again. And then what? Then the world will deal with them like Islamic Brotherhood and the Algerian Islamists, whom, after winning the election, they denied access to power, correct? Rather than doing that, it is better to act now and reverse the situation, which is a very achievable goal. Thank you so much.
Professor Bhattacharya, can't thank you enough for your eloquent presentation. I have two requests. One is that kindly do send your presentation to the Commission, because you have very specific, tangible suggestions as always. And I think whatever we can do, the Commission will undertake its own function and task in order to send them to the appropriate bodies and to take appropriate action. So that's my first request.
Thank you.
And second is that kindly stay in touch, because ever since I was with you, I heard you not simply talk, but you're from very heart, the kind of passion and consistent, continuous kind of progress and journey for human rights. So my deep appreciation, my Sadar Namaskar to you, and I simply want you to know that I have followed again, that you have been continuing to do that. And since then, I have not stayed silent either. You haven't heard a whole lot, but from the ambassadors from Bangladesh to the prime ministers there, through the United Nations, through the United States, making my own humble effort in order to see that things happen. I did not ask a whole lot from the government of India, because the government of India seems to have its own hands tied up, but government of India also needs to speak. So the second request that I have is kindly stay in touch, and the Commission would be deeply grateful to you for your help. Before I give to Adityanjee, I simply want to say two things. I've been following the chat, and there are a couple questions that I need to answer. And also, Mr. Sarkar, you wanted to say a couple words. Another Skar, yep, you have the floor before we go. And after the Adityanjee has spoken with Professor Bhattacharya. So Bhattacharya ji, again, my deep admiration and my Sadar Namaskar.
Professor Nanda, I have some colleagues here from your Montreal lecture in our meeting, which are Mr. Rupkumar Bhaumik, Bidyut
wonderful.
Yes, Bhaumik is here. Dilip Nath is here. They all join me to express our profound gratitude to you. We are also grateful to Mr. Clemens, who helped us immensely in continuing this effort. I'm enormously grateful to this organization. Adityanjee, all the attorney, all of you, thank you so much for this is such an important event for us. Thank you so much.
Would you kindly give my
warmest regards? Nanda, it has been my dream to contact with you for the past 15 years. So if you could put your email, I'm sending a message to you. I need your email.
Thank you very much. I will. and kindly give my warmest regards to
Thank
them.
you. Thank
And
you.
back to Adityanjee, and then I'll say a couple words.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nandaji. You give me the opportunity to speak myself. I heard Dr. Bhattacharjya and also all of your comments and discussion. I thank you very much. From 2001, you are with us for the supporting of Hindus of Bangladesh atrocities. We cannot thank you enough. But there is one question just I want to tell you. We are nobody in Bangladesh. You realize in the name of secularism, they killed our identity. There's no minority status. And we don't enjoy citizen status either. We are not getting the benefit as a citizen of Bangladesh, minorities especially. It is time, within 50 years, on the population decrease from 28% to 8.5%. It is a factor. Now, it's time to ask Bangladesh government as recognized as a minority. With the recognition, we can ask for protected land, protected area, or reserve to keep our identity, and also we can ask for separate election or separate representative from my community, minority communities, who can speak in behalf of us in Bangladesh Parliament, or we can raise our voice. Number 3, we can ask for separate minority ministry. Separate minority ministry will gonna take care of the vested property and all the properties left by the peoples who refuse to go to India, to refusing, and that property and stuff have to be taken care of the minority commission. Number 4, the people was forced to go to India as a refugee, took the refugee property behind, and their business is was left behind, was taken by the government as a enemy property in the act of enemy property law. That property have to bring these people back. If we can ask UN to send all the refugees from Myanmar or from Rohingya refugees to go back to Burma. So why, in the same act, why we cannot ask Bangladeshi refugees to refuse to India to bring them back, give their property back, give their citizenship back? This is the whole new way to see solve our problem. It have to be recognized as a minority, because if we are nobody, we're going to get extinct from this society, from the map of Bangladesh. Pakistani Hindus, like Afghan Hindus, we don't want to take refugee in India. We don't want to leave our motherland. Why I have to force myself to leave my motherland, my ancestral and generation to generation, hundreds of years, thousands of years, we live in India.
Sarkarji, thank you. Thank you very, very much. And I think before we proceed, and I have got a couple things, and there are other people, Dr. Benkin wants to say something, and a couple other people, but Adityanjee, please go ahead, and my apologies, because Adityanjee had, I'm sure, some questions and comments for Dr. Bhattacharjya. So Adityanjee, please go ahead.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Bhattacharjya, for your eloquent testimony and your cogent suggestions as to how to tackle it. We do have your initial report. If you want to submit any supplementary report, the Commission will look at it. Just as a piece of information, all our witnesses have submitted some material in the form of a written report or PowerPoint presentation, the Commission will consider all that material in creating a special report, which our Executive Director and Special Rapporteur for this event, Mr. Clemens, will finally write under the supervision of the Special Hearing Committee's Chairperson. So there is still some time for witnesses, audience members to give their suggestions, as well as supplementary information and documentation to the Commission through our Executive Director, Mr. Clemens. I do not have any further questions for Mr. Bhattacharya. I do know that Dr. Richard Benkin wants to make a special mention. So with your kind permission, Chairperson, sir, please allow Mr. Richard Benkin.
Thank you. I'm going to, and after Mr. Benkin speaks, then I have, after Dr. Benkin, a couple of comments. Dr. Benkin, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Because I can't see myself on this right now.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you, Professor. First of all, again, my sincere thanks to especially you, Professor Nanda, and to the organization as a whole. What I wanted to say very simply was we have heard from speakers today, and we've seen in the past, that we've done a pretty good job of documenting these atrocities. But that hasn't really, the Bangladeshi government has not changed. So I don't think that's a direction. We already know what's going on. Secondly, I've despaired over a decade and a half of trying to get the Bangladeshi government to do what's nice, to do the right thing, to recognize what might even be in their best interest. So what I really want to emphasize, I think what has to be done is to take action that forces them to do the right thing. Now, clearly, we're not sending in the Marines, so that action would have to do with perhaps there are legal avenues that can be taken, and that's certainly way above my pay grade. Certainly, as I mentioned, there are economic actions that should be taken. I think, again, there were two ways. One's the formal sanction path, and the other is the mass movement on the ground. But I don't think the Bangladeshi government will change anything unless we force them to change it. In that regard, I want to mention to the committee that I've developed over the last several years, and you saw the example of one of them recently. I've developed over the years a really decent number of U.S. legislators, both parties, both in the House and Senate. In fact, both my minority and majority reached out to me recently to help them with questions to the nominee to be the new ambassador to Bangladesh. So I have a lot of people that recognize this, that know we can do something, that want to do something about it, that recognize the great leverage the United States has. And I am very happy to work with this organization and to work with my contacts in the House and Senate. So in fact, the United States can take action that will get the Bangladeshi government to finally do the right thing, because they're certainly not going to do it on their own. Please believe me, they will not do it on their own. And it doesn't matter if it's Sheikh Hasina or Khaled Zia, they're two sides of the same coin. Thank you very, very much for allowing me to speak a little more. I can't hear you, Professor. I can't.
I'm sorry, I was muted. So I simply want to say thank you, Dr. Benkin. And Mr. Clemens, I see another hand up. Is there somebody else who wants to say a couple of words?
Professor Nanda, this is Rup Kumar Bhaumik.
Oh, Bhaumik-ji, namaskar.
Namaskar. It was,
wonderful to see you again.
I'm overwhelmingly very emotional because I don't know anyone in my life who was so kind for the destitute, oppressed people of Bangladesh, who has been so kind, who has been in our various meetings for the period of time. And when I saw that you were being awarded with, one of the India's most prestigious Padma Bhushan, I really, that made me cry because, and also you are one of the most eloquent and, who speaks giant speaker. I have a quick question, sir.
Yes.
That is, I am the victim of numerous atrocities. In 1964, I have witnessed there was a mass killing, Hindu killing, and citing that Hazrat Bal was being stolen. Hazrat Bal Mosque, I don't know where it is, but then in East Pakistan, and we survived. Somehow we survived. In 1971, I was one of the refugee, and my family was one of the refugee. We lost, we have been driven out from our property, landed properties. Our life started on the street, because we were being driven out from our ancestral landed properties. And as it was, I think you know, but don't know much about the Enemy Property Act, the Vested Property Act, how that can affect the victims or their families, their lives. This book was, I do not know if you have a copy of this. This is Deprivation of Hindu Minority in Bangladesh. That this documented 10 million Hindus were directly affected, and the value of the property that they lost, according to this statistician, economist, Professor Abul Barkat, that the value was in 2007, it was like $55 billion, 75% of the GDP of the country. Now, as I know that still we could not have our life, being everyone together, even as you know, the Kennedy report and all other reports that how the Hindus have been sacrificed in 1971. You, meaning your country, great country, great as you get the. My question is there any law? You are the president of the International Jurists Association, and you have been teaching on human rights and on this law. Is there any law that the victims or their legal heirs can get any compensation, or do you know that where they can go, or which court can be used?
Comically, there are only two possibilities. One is that you can go through that country, and obviously in Bangladesh, at the present time, there is no remedy that can be considered adequate. Then the second part is that you can come to the United States, and there is one particular law, and that law permits an alien to bring an action for violation of basic human rights. But it's a very strict law, and I don't think that that will work. And before the International Court of Justice or any international body, there is no way that somebody like you and me alone can go and fight that case. The only other possibility is that a government take your action, and being a national of that government, that government takes a position and fights on your behalf. And that becomes deeply, deeply difficult, impossible practically. So I think you're absolutely right. As an individual, having suffered all that atrocity and humiliation and all those problems, that we are practically at this stage, despite all these human rights protections, not able to really get any adequate remedy at all. So my apologies to you, but that unfortunately is the current position.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have got Prakash Gupta wants to say a couple words, and we are going to conclude the session in about 4 minutes. And I wanted to say a couple words. So Prakash ji, if you want to take only 1 minute, and I'm going to stop you in 1 minute, please say. Mr. Prakash Gupta. Mr. Clemens, can you permit Mr. Prakash Gupta to say a couple words?
Yes, I'm going to request him to unmute.
Thank you.
I think he's probably dropped off. So I think you should just go ahead, Vidji.
All right. There are 3 things that have in the chat come. One is about sanctions. The other one is about the International Court of Justice. And the third one, there was a question directly sent to me that the Commission's future action. Let me start with sanctions. I think the comment was appropriate. Sanctions at times are blunt and people suffer, ordinary people, when you take sanctions. But at the same time, smart sanctions and sanctions that are multilateral, they do have an impact upon it. You can look at especially South Africa and apartheid. And it was multilateral sanctions that finally took that apartheid out. And so that's probably all I want to say. International Court of Justice, it's only states that can go there. And also you and I and this commission and international non-governmental organizations can't do much about all that. And I think there are a couple of other questions raised, and I think I have put my email. Kindly send it to me offline. We can talk about it because I don't want to take any more time. I simply want to say thank you to Adityanjee, thank you to Mr. Clemens, because this commission's action today is a very important one. This hearing is very important. Those who appeared as witnesses, you heard them, their eloquent remarks. You could sense their grief. You could sense their passion. You could sense their seemingly desperation because not much has happened. And so today, this commission also is going to put whatever 2 pennies worth it can do in order to reach out to people again. And I think at this stage, I'm going to simply ask our rapporteur and the person who put all this together, Mr. Clemens, to say a few words. And I think we'll conclude the session after that.
To Vednanda ji and everyone who joined today, both who testified as well as those who attended as witnesses to this hearing, I thank you all for your time. Again, if you have any materials, and I'm speaking both to the people who testified as well as the witnesses, there were some very informative comments from some of the audience. If you have any materials that you would like to send to us, please send it to me at carl.clemens@ichrrf.org. I put my email in the chat. We will be coming up with a full report on the hearings within the month and publish that. Also, this hearing has been recorded and it will be uploaded to YouTube by tomorrow morning. So I thank you all one more time, and I hand the stage over back to Dr. Adityanjee.
Thank you very much indeed to our Honorable Chairperson, our witnesses, our audience, and members of the ICHRRF team to make this unique hearing successful. It is not a time to sort of pat ourselves on back. It is a serious human rights violation issue. The situation in Bangladesh is very, very disturbing. The Commission will compile the report and start taking concrete action at country level, at international level, and at multilateral level. Wherever we have some outreach, we will do our best so that the continuation of atrocities on the people of Bangladesh, especially the minority Hindu population of Bangladesh, ceases forthwith. We have come to end of our time. We are actually 2 minutes past the time. So all the discussion, at least at this point in time, needs to cease. We can have our ongoing discussion offline and in the form of email or phone calls or chats. So there will be possibility, because otherwise we will continue to be, spending more time. It was supposed to finish at 12 p.m. So my apologies to Dr. Benkin because he has raised his hands once again. We will be talking offline, and let's conclude this session. Professor Nanda has to call the meeting to be adjourned.
Dr. Adityanjee, thank you. Dr. Benkin, you and I can talk about it later. The question that you raised is a good one, and I think we need to find a way out. And I want to again thank Dr. Adityanjee, Mr. Clemens, but my sincere thanks to all of you who attended and people who have given today their testimony. And these witnesses, you heard them, and deeply, deeply grateful to them. But I simply want to say that the suggestions that have been made, they have been very concrete, very cogent, very realistic. And as far as we can do, we are going to be able to send them out to appropriate bodies, as Dr. Adityanjee said. With that, my deep gratitude to the organization for holding these hearings. And again, my deep gratitude to each one of you for coming. The hearings are adjourned.